Hi guys. So today let us understand about what is a use effect hook. So first thing, a use effect is a hook provided by React, and the purpose is to respond to some changes in a variable. For example, here I'm just giving an example of a count variable, a count state variable in a component, let us say counter. Now, suppose if the count variable increases or decreases, and in such situations, when a variable changes, you want to do something, let us say printing in the console, then you have to use useEffect hook. To use it is very simple. Inside the useEffect hook, you have to provide a function, and that function is called every time there is a change in the variable. So if the count is increased or the count is decreased, in that situation, this function will be fired every time, and you can do whatever action you want. For example, printing in the console or sending an email to the administrator or whatever you like. So that is a useEffect hook. And now we are going to also write a simple code in our existing counter function to see how we can use it. So now let's get back to our counter component. If you remember, last time we did create a counter component. So now we will go back to our counter component and we will try to implement a useEffect hook in there. So to use useEffect is very simple. Like we have imported use state, we can write comma, comma, and we can also import the useEffect hook. That is the first thing. Second, we will now in the top write, or here also we can write useEffect, and inside that write a function. We will write an arrow function because usually we should use arrow functions more. And inside this useEffect, I'm going to just do a very simple thing, which is write a console.log of count variable changed. Now, one thing to understand, whatever the variable you want to respond to, like count in this case, you also have to provide an array, and inside that you have to mention that variable, in this case count. So if you want to respond to the change of count, you have to provide the count variable. If you want to respond to change of, let us say, title, then you have to provide the title variable. Next thing, let us now try to run this piece of code and verify if our code is working fine. So I'll save this file and go back to my app.js and remove my hobby component and just write my counter component here, save it, and let's try to run our application. I think I just need to, okay, so reload it. I think most likely I might have not saved this file. So, and I'll also on the console. All right, so the counter is visible right now. And let's now try to increase the value of the counter. And the moment I click on increase, you will see that the hook is fired, okay, and count variable is changed, is visible here. All right, So whenever account variable changes, this hook is going to be fired, like you can see here. So if I now try to even decrease, again count variable changed, which means the useEffect function is fired, even in reset. All right. So that is what I was trying to tell you, how to use a useEffect hook. You can do the same thing with title also and any other state variable. Now this is one use of useEffect. All right. There is one more additional use of useEffect, which is similar to the behavior of a, I would say, constructor, which means, let us consider a scenario this time that we want to, print in the console when the component is loaded. That means when the component is placed in our HTML, which means it is placed here in the HTML that time. So for this, we can again use this useEffect, but the difference is that now, the useEffect will be having a parameter which is an empty array. This is to tell React that now you will call this function inside the useEffect only once when the component is loaded into the browser. That's all. This is also similar to a React lifecycle hook, which is called component did mount. We are not covering class-based components because it is very old, almost 4 or 5 years before we used to use them. But in those days, we used to have a React hook called lifecycle hook called component did mount. This is similar to that. So now I'm going to write here inside this counter component loaded, component loaded. Now if I save it, you will see that the first time the component loads in the browser, this will be called, this particular useEffect will be called. And after that, whenever we change the counter or do anything, this function is not called. Let's now try to again run this piece of code, and you will see counter component loaded, which is available here. But if I again try to make any state variable change, you will see that I'm not again seeing the value counter component loaded, which means the counter component loaded is only called when the component loads in the HTML, loads in the browser. That's it. Why do we need it? We need it for many reasons. Because let us say we want to do something when the component loads for the first time. One of the examples is making a request to the server and getting some data. We don't want to do it every time, because we know whenever we change a state variable, our entire component reloads. So in that situation, we don't want to make that call every time. Because the interesting thing is, even when the entire component reloads, especially the UI, you will see that this useEffect is not fired. You see, this useEffect is not fired. Why? Because it is only fired for the first time when the component loads, and this is an ideal place for me to make a request to the server to get some data or do anything that we need to do when the component is loaded. So that is another use of useEffect hook. Okay, now I would like you guys to write this piece of code and execute it. And if you have any questions, then you can let me know. We will then move to the next discussion of few more uses of useEffect